So we've got a variety of vehicles here. This one would have been what we call a bit of a bitzer, not original, but it would have got somebody going, and it's based on the lines of a gig, and a gig is a fixed seated forward-facing vehicle. So when you have carts and cars, inverted commas, they have movable seats, but a gig, its definition is the fixed seat. So it'd be very much made for that particular size of animal. For two people to sit from, this one's a little bit narrow, but it's obviously been much loved and used, so it's done the job. So the story of the governor's cart, or tub trap, because it's the shape of a tub, was your utility vehicle, really, that from the village or the farm, you could put the whole family in it, and it was a low-key vehicle that was good for everybody. It's got the big wheels for going over the ruts, you put your cob in the front. This one's quite a long one, so if you've got 4 kids and mum or dad, you could squash them all in, go to the village, to the market, and still have a little bit of room for your shopping to come home. We're now moving on to the modern reproduction copy. This would have been made probably the 70s, 80s, and it's a reproduction copy of an old vehicle that was built for driving trials. So we'd have the disc brakes on it, it's got the sprung pole here, and it's for 2 horses or 2 ponies. It looks like it's original and it's elegant, but it's made for the modern competition. And then you go here to another more or less copy, but it's much more original in places. The wheels, as you can see, are much finer than the modern vehicle next door to it. So although it's a big carriage, it's still got fine wheels. And then I would think this was an original body, but you can see where the modern front was remade, really. But got the work inside these original bodies is incredible. All the finish of the materials, the upholstery. This is for opening and shutting the windows, slide up and down. And remember, years and years ago, glass would have been very expensive. So now we're starting to move high end. This would be for a pair of horses. You've got your splinter bar with the roller boats for attaching the traces, and your pole would go in here. And then this is, again, not sure really what this was, but I would think that this was made from the ironwork of an original vehicle, and then somebody's redone the body on top. There's a few intricacies, like the footboard folds up. You don't often see that. But again, you see vehicles like this for weddings and outings like that. Much more for the modern world, but needs a lot of work. And a lot of these carriages here come in because they're at the end of their usage, or somebody wants to upgrade, or just disperse a sale of collection. So lots of different vehicles that tell lots of different stories. So it doesn't matter what sort of driving you want to do, there will be a carriage here for you. And it's knowing what you want to do and find the right carriage. It's a bit like buying a car. If you want to drive around the roads in the country, you get a bit more of a robust car. If you want a really flash, smart car to drive in town, then you go high-end sports car. Carriages are no different. This is for big horses, and you used to find that it was for transporting a lot of people. So if you had a big house party and you wanted to go from one house to the next, and it was a nice day, you'd put a load of people in the back, or you wanted to go and watch, I don't know, the shoot or something like that. You could get a lot of people in. They used to sometimes also move the staff from one house to another in these sort of carriages. And what's interesting about this, they're iron shod. So they make quite a bit of noise on the metallic roads, but iron shod wheels ran before the rubber wheels that sit in clinchers. These are heated onto the wheels when they make the wheels. So they get this really hot, they have the wheel on the floor, they put it in and they let it sink in and tighten up on the wheel. Really good, but they do make a bit of noise, so you've got to make sure your horse is capable of putting up with that, and that's just down to training. It's a big vehicle, you've got to be quite fit these days to get up and things. And you think people were a lot smaller than me. I'm quite tall for the size of people who, say, 100, 200 years ago were getting up. So you can put your foot on here, sometimes they put them on there, up here, pull yourself up and go. And you've got handles here. It's quite high up. You've got your spindles along the side, and again, just for practicality, they have put a backing on the spindles, so whoever is sitting here doesn't get the spray of the mud as you're going down the tracks. Because remember, we didn't have a lot of tar macadam roads, they were tracks. So you would get a lot of spray or dust coming up. So you had the boards here to protect the clothing. We didn't have dry cleaners. So again, you wanted to protect everything. But to add a bit of finish, you have these very pretty finials.
Never went.
Try and do this one. For me, this is one of the nicest vehicles in the sale. It's original. It's got a lovely patina to it. And I was asked, would you buy this to maintain it with its natural patina, or would you buy it to use it? That's your choice. But if you're here to come and find a vehicle to drive, you can put, this would be for the traditional showing, for attelage, or the vintage type driving. You would have a single horse on here and two people on the front and possibly two on the back. But it's really nice. It's got some nice finish to it. Here, whereas we were talking about you could put your foot on the step to get up, this has actually got a step with a bit of a guard on it, so your foot didn't slide through the spokes. And then 1, 2, up you get. These seats would move back and forth a little bit to ensure that you've got good foot control. And on the back here, this would roll down. There's not quite enough room to open it. And the chains would just hold it. So you've got a footboard for those sitting behind. Now, this style of vehicle is you've gone up social status in comparison to the tub trap. So this would, for me, would be your Land Rover Discovery. So you can still drive it town in a slightly more muted effect, or much more country, to go to market, to go to town, to go visiting, whatever. It's a lovely vehicle. It's got lovely patina, and for me, this is the vehicle, if I was going to buy one today, that I would go home with. So whereas that was a four-wheel vehicle, we're now onto the two-wheel vehicle. This is either a chair-back gig because it's got that chair-like finish. Some people would call it a cut-under gig. I think it's more like a chair-back gig because it's very comfortable to sit on, be nice to travel a long distance. So if you again, were sort of, I suppose, going up the standards again. For two of you, it was comfortable to drive the 6 miles into town, because if you think about the villages and the towns, they're all a regulated distance between them. So it's generally sort of from town to town, it's about 6 miles if you think about it. And that would be comfortable to drive in, go to the market, go shopping, go to church, anything like that. It's a fixed seated vehicle, so it's again comes under the terminology of a gig. And you've got a whip holder here, because as much as nowadays we don't call them whips, a whip replaces your leg. So if a horse balks or something like that, you've just got that little bit of encouragement. You've got the lamp holders, and you've got the easy steps up as well. Because remember, years ago, a lady would not have shown her ankles if she was in a longer dress. So you couldn't have a big step up. And this made it easier to step up. Nice set of fine wheels, and then your shafts with all the places for the fittings for the harness. This one's got a patent leather dashboard, and again that denotes it's just a little bit more upmarket. It's also got a swingle tree, and that allows for a little bit of movement through the draft traces that go up to the collar, so it's not going to rub the horse's shoulders. Done up, this could be a nice vehicle. And if I remember rightly, I used to compete against the lady who used to own this. But nice, comfortable vehicle to roll in. And then we come back to a smaller version of a governor's cart. And this would have been very much probably from a bigger house, because they were the houses that had the smaller ponies, just for the governess and the children to be entertained with. And again, it's got nice solid size, so the kids can't put the fingers through and trap them in the wheels. It's similar to the one we saw up earlier, but this I could see being much more used as a take the children for a bit of airing, or maybe a single lady who's got a smaller pony in village life. So it's about the stories. Find out what those vehicles were used for years ago and retell that story basically. But all the vehicles that we've seen today were going down the traditional end of the market. So there's the showing, or there's the attelage, or just driving to have fun in a nice vehicle. Whereas we talked about that really nice four-wheeler with its lovely patina, this is a two-wheel version of the same sort of vehicle. Again, it's got a lovely original air about it. It's obviously been in storage for a long time, but it's all there. Simple things that just make it look original. The splinter bar across here is fine, and it's got all the correct bolts on it. And you've got the swingle tree that we talked about in one of the other vehicles for allowing the draft to move through the collar, is attached to chains which will then pull from the axle. So you're pulling up and through. Got robust but well-shaped lamp brackets. You can tell with the modern ones, the metal isn't as fine, and there seems to be they can't get the same shape that you got from the older metalwork. You've got a footrest here. So this vehicle could easily have been made for somebody, literally almost bespoke. So they would sit here, you've got a sliding seat to change the balance on a two-wheeler, because a two-wheeler balances a little bit like a seesaw. You sit over the axle, you don't want too much weight on the horse's back, because I can tell you you'll get indigestion, and you want it just to float. And you adjust that by adjusting your weight and the seat over the axle till it all floats in the right position. It's quite essential that you have the right size horse and the right harness. And we'll talk about the sort of harness you use for this sort of thing later, because it's getting all the balance. It's the engineering of the whole turnout that gives you that lovely ride. And I would think this will give a beautiful floating ride. Again, you've got the lovely shafts. Yes, I know they look tatty at the moment, but the seasoning in that wood, once it's all been sorted out, just gives you that spring and a lovely ride. To me, if I was again coming home with a vehicle, it would be the four-wheeler and this two-wheeler. Both sort of the same size, so if you had the right size horse for it, you've got a four-wheeler and a two-wheeler that's going to take you everywhere, isn't it? It is very much on the traditional side again, but that's where we're looking at for you at the moment. So I think you've got two that you should get quite interested in. Okay, now we're going to move over to the trade commercial type vehicles. And remember, wheeled vehicles didn't necessarily have to be horse-drawn. For various different trades, you could have push handcarts. And we've got a nice little collection here of different handcarts that would have done different jobs in town, whatever. This one is particularly nice. It's from a dairy. So you could see this being pushed around town. Got all the crates for the milk bottles. The roof on the top just to keep the birds off them or keep it cool as much as you could. Up this end, you've got the hooks for hanging various things of whatever they needed to. It could have been a pay bag, whatever thing like that. Normally the guy who was selling that sort of thing would have his satchel over his shoulders, but loaded up, that would be quite hard to push, but it would roll. You've got iron shod wheels here as well, so you could almost hear it rumbling along. But for the dairy to do the local sales, just very local to the dairy, this would be a lovely little vehicle. As a collector's piece, you don't see them very often, and I think this has got a lovely charm about it, and it's got a huge amount of history. If only these vehicles could talk, they could tell us so much. We've got other various handcarts for whatever they were moving around, and then obviously as the carts and the loads got bigger, or you wanted to travel them further, we would move on to the horse-drawn vehicles. Now you have various shapes, and it depended on what goods you were travelling. This one's being portrayed as a confectioner's vehicle. So in the back you would have some racks where all the confectionery would be stored. It's kept away from the dust and everything. So it might be that a confectioner from a town has a village 2 or 3 miles away, and they might go there to deliver it to the village store. Or they're just going around a bigger town delivering, or delivering to the big houses. Because remember, a lot of these vehicles used to sell on the street. So if you went down the street, it was known what time the run would be. The housewives would come out and go, oh, that's Charlie with the cakes or whatever, and they would buy straight off the carriage. But I would think this was probably a bit more of a delivery one to the shops. So you'd have the driver and possibly his young lad who would be there to help. This is again a nice vehicle, again iron shod. It's quite fine wheels, and it's not overly big, and with confectionery it wouldn't have been a heavy load, so they could have used a smaller cob to pull it. So again, it's very much the small business turnout or delivery van. We use the term turnout, that means it's the horse, the carriage, the whole setup we call turnouts. So when you hear me saying a turnout, that's what we're talking about. We've got another bakery vehicle here, and this one's quite interesting because you have the doors at the front as much as the doors at the back. So for whatever reason they decided that that worked for them. And you have to remember, over the years all these vehicles evolved to do a job. We customise our cars these days, or our vans, delivery vans. They were no different. They just customised it to make it work for them. This one's got the rubber wheels on, so it would be less noisy, but it's a bigger, more robust vehicle, so it would have had a bigger horse to pull it. But also remember, in those days, you would have strong cobs that were fit to do the job. We didn't have these big horses that are over 16 hands. 16 hands was considered a big coaching horse in this day and age that these vehicles were running. Smaller, compact, cheaper to keep, less injury, and they had the strength to do the job. You have lots of little added extras on here. Nice metalwork, adding a little bit of finesse to the handles. You have a rein rail, and that's to stop the reins, or it's to hold the reins in place, because quite often in those days you could stop your horse, just lay your reins down or clip your reins, and the horse would stand because it knew its trip that it was doing. So Mondays it knew it could stop here, stop there. Tuesday. It's amazing how these horses knew what the day of the week it was and what the round was going to be. We have the handbrake system. There's no foot brake on this one, so the handbrake works on a ratchet and it comes down the outside, works through, so it goes through on a bar to both back wheels, and the wooden blocks tighten up against the wheel, and that locks the wheel, or just can help to slow it down, like a little bit like feathering the brake. These vehicles wouldn't have been going fast. They would go at a sensible, steady pace to do the job, to deliver the goods, not to shake them up in the back as you go over all the bumps, but to make sure that your horse could do quite a big round every day of the week. And the four-wheelers just nearly always had the brakes just to hold them. Then we're moving on to a hearse. This is a modern reproduction one, and I'm sure in the future that we will take you to show you some of the more traditional funeral directors and give you the history behind them. But basically it's to carry the coffin from the house or the funeral directors to the church, horse-drawn, and it's another vehicle for conveyance. There are some very, very nice hearses out there. Unfortunately, we haven't got one to show you today, but we will bring that to you. I don't think many of us want to travel in this at the moment, do we? We're not quite ready for that one yet. Now, we've got an array of some nice vehicles here. This one is a two-wheeled stick-back gig. Stick-back, obviously, because of the spindles around the back. It's a gig because it's a fixed, seated, forward-facing vehicle. It's very high-end, smart. So this would be your London vehicle, your big town vehicle for a couple or a single person to go out. So you're starting to look at your sports car. It's got nice shaped mud guards, nice big wheels, and this is the sort of vehicle with a finer horse, because everything's fine, it's petite, it's slimline, everything, and sporty. So I mean sporty not in the sporting element of the hunting, shooting and fishing, but sporty like a sports car. So you'd have a smart horse in this, and nowadays you would use this for showing and attelage. So that's that. Now, what's quite interesting is here is we've got the butcher's cart, and as you see, all these gentlemen here looking at it, they will know the ins and outs of what is original, what isn't original, whether it's nice, whether it's thing. It has an air of looking well. It does have some quite big blocks under the springing onto the axle, so it's been pumped up in height a little bit. That was quite normal because you had to make your vehicle fit your horse, and if it was a little bit out, in order to make it run better, you could raise it up a little bit. But from the butchery point of view, you've got the louvers for letting the fresh air through to keep the meat cool, and then the butcher would sit up on the top. So is it genuine?
I think the top is. I don't think the axles are.
So like in every trade, you have to have your general dealer. So they would deal in anything. They've got a flatbed trolley here, sign written, and of course they're selling their services. So they're always brightly painted and with a little bit of design on it there because they're selling themselves to who they are. You will see this type of trolley used to transport all sorts of things. It could be fruit and veg, it could be crates, it could be wood, anything that moves, people moving house, all that sort of thing. A really good utilitarian vehicle, generally pulled by a good old cob who would last all day. They don't need to travel at speed. They now run on pneumatic tyres. Like with everything, there's been a little bit of progress over the years, but they were there to do a job. And you do still see, after all, you told me you still saw the rag and bone men up where you live. So these were the sort of flatbed trolleys that they can put everything onto and transport. So here we have a really nice array of collection of vehicles. You've got your two-wheelers for private use. So this would be your private vehicle. And then you've got a trade vehicle, and this is a butcher's cart for not a very big horse. And then you've got a stick-back gig. This is for quite a small pony. And this one I would think is another chair-back gig, similar to the one we saw earlier, but it's slightly squarer. Again, for a slightly bigger pony than this one. Here, this is modern. But if you wanted just to exercise your pony, who would probably fit the first little stick-back gig, this is a robust modern vehicle, all metal, looks along the lines of a traditional one, but it's not. But it's your everyday vehicle. It's a bit like your Ford Fiesta from years ago. Then we've got a round back gig here. This is for a slightly bigger sort of 13.2 cob or pony. Again, fixed seated, so it's another gig. And then we have another stick-back gig that's sadly seen better days. But you have to remember, what man made once, they can make again. The reproduction work these days is really, really good. Can't quite get the steel and the temper in the metal that they could years ago, because all the metal was forged rather than how it's heated and pressed these days. But you can reproduce all this sort of thing. So if it's a rotten floor, you can replace it. And then this is another form of a milk float, but this one's on pneumatic tyres. So that would have been a much more provincial vehicle, probably a lot more modern. It hasn't quite got the lines of a previous milk float that we've seen, but it was probably used in the 40s, 50s, and it did a job. And so long as it did a job, it was a vehicle that could be used. If you get the aficionados there, the real connoisseurs of vehicles, they will find fault in it everywhere. But of its period, I would think it's probably not too far out, because you have to remember all these vehicles evolved over the years. Just as they evolved into cars now, carriages and horse-drawn vehicles all improved and evolved. If you go back to Tutankhamun time, up to now, you can see the line of progression and how things have been tweaked, just how you can see them with the modern cars of today. So we're now in the accoutrement section, and this part is where we've got loads of bits and pieces that all go together to making a turnout and enhancing the carriage or some of the equipment. And we're going to start off with, we've got an array of whips. We've got everything from dealer whips to private driving whips to some riding whips, all made out of either bone, whalebone, holly, bamboo, everything, all with the lashes which are hand plaited. The tops here come from a shape of a goose quill, and these are all hand done. You don't get the machines to do these, and it's quite a skill in its own right. Then we move on to all the different styles of lamps. So we've got some really nice lamps here where the glass bulbs out. They would have been expensive in their time. Remember, glass was quite an expensive thing. You've got the beautiful shaped engraved lamps here, and they would have been all for different levels and standards, social standing of carriages. You've got these big square ones out there. These lamps is what lit the way when you were out driving at night. And they've got silver internal elements so the flame from the candle bounces back and throws the light out. And you have brass finishes and silver finishes. And that would denote if your harness and the furniture, which is like the buckles and the finer points of metalwork on your carriage was brass, then your lamps would be brass. If everything was silver or silver plate, then your lamps would be silver plate. Everything tied in together. This is like massive coaching lamp, because the coaches were big, they had to cover a large area of ground, so I can't lift these up because they're set here ready for sale, but the light that would spread out there allows you to see the 4 horses in front of you. This piece down here is a whip holder. So again, going back to the holly whips with the goose quills, in order to keep that shape, you would wrap it around that reel and let the whip hang down. We've got more holly whips here, and some hunting whips and things like that. These are all collector's pieces in their own right, but they were always made, especially the higher end you went, the finer the work that went on it. We come round to this area here. We have all the coach horns. There's probably some tandem horns as well. And they were to announce as you drove into town that the coach was coming, or if coaches were passing. There were all sorts of tunes that would be played that everybody would understand what they meant, like going past, leaving town, coming in, all that sort of thing. And they also had tunes that were played that would just keep everybody going. to find a good horn blower and to have those tunes being played. You see it now occasionally. We have horn blowing competitions at the shows with the big 4-horse teams and coaches, and it's lovely to hear it, the banter between the horn blowers of who can play the best tunes. But those tunes always meant something. And then we come round further, lots of little things. Top hats. Again, years ago, everybody wore a hat. We don't see it now, but years ago, we all wore hats. And the top hats are very easy to find in small sizes, but we've all grown, so we've got bigger heads. And to find a beautifully shaped hat that's big enough to fit the modern man is quite difficult. Of course, those who go racing at Ascot and Ascot Week, these hats actually command quite a bit of money. And then we have beautiful basket work horn carrier. This would sit on the side of the carriage. And again, this is all handmade, beautifully done. More hats. And then here, this is for me one of the nicest pieces in the whole sale. Somebody has lovingly pulled together all the buckles and furniture that you would have in a harness maker's shop. And they're labelled. And all these designs, depending on where they came from, had different names. So different provinces had different designs, all that sort of thing. This is social history that is very rare to find these days. And it's absolutely beautiful. The only other place I've seen this is in the most fabulous buckle and metalware shop in Paris. But the very fact that this has been catalogued like this is unbelievable. You've got all the cart harness, and it would be from lots of different designers, lots of different makers, and the provinces. So again, this in itself is just a massive social history. And what's lovely is all the lists are there as well. Now you might think it doesn't mean anything, but to the absolute connoisseur, it's a little bit like doing concours cars. It matters. But to you, because you're just coming into your driving, it doesn't matter. But it's nice to know that social history. So now we've got to harness, and that's a minefield, to be honest with you. But again, go back to thinking what story you're telling. We've been looking at the private driving vehicles, so we're looking for real leather. For the four-wheeler that we looked back, that nice one with the patina, we're looking for robust working harness. So really a nice top-end pair of working boots. Something for your horse to work in, be comfortable, yet still look really smart. We've got an array of harness here, good, bad and indifferent, all sizes. This set here is blingy and shiny, but actually it's not really great. If you look at the size of the stitches there, that tells you that we're looking at the low end of the market. And some of the tongues on the buckles, this has probably been imported. Then we come to here. Now immediately you see that the stitch holes and the stitch sizes are much finer. The saddle here is much finer. The brass work, you've got much better quality tongues on the buckles. Overall, the leather is much more quality, and the harness maker has put in more designs in here. So now we're going a little bit more upmarket. This would suffice quite well for a two-wheeler, because you've got the tugs here for the shafts to go through, nice strong traces. This has all been used, but it's quite nice. Your reins here are nice quality, though again, They're a bit wide for a lady's hand. These are all the little things that you start to look for. Then we come to this set of harness. Now this, again, an old set. This is much more thicker set. The saddle's wider because that disperses the weight across the back. It's plain leather, it's not shiny leather. It's been a bit repaired. Does that matter? No. Obviously, if you were going into a competition, it reduces the overall effect because you think, oh, well, it's been repaired. But again, we used to repair things lots of times later. We're not in those days, they weren't in the throwaway society. They used to make, do and mend. This is also lined out in serge, and that helps for the sweat to be absorbed through into the flock lining underneath. Again, if you were going to use this would want a complete overhaul. But actually, it's not a bad set of harness. Good utilitarian set of harness, but would need looking at, and a good clean. Here we go to your really heavy utilitarian harness. This would be the trade harness, nice wide saddle to disperse the load, big thick set collar, all wool check lined to help absorb everything. Your bridle has square blinkers. They would have probably been patent leather patinaed on the outside. Well, that was japanned leather, actually it was called then, because it had this surface, but as it gets older it cracks and it comes away. Single loops, where we would have box loops with lots of designs on, which we'll show you at another time. But a good utilitarian set of harness for the heavier vehicle. Then we're going down this side, and this is where it all changes. This is modern biothane, which replaces leather. It's easy, it's quick. Funny enough, it doesn't rub, which is a really good advantage to it, and it lasts quite a long time. This is much more of a trade set copy. You wouldn't use it in shows or anything like that, but for everyday use, to enjoy your trade turnout or your trolley or something like that, then that's what they do. For the top end of the market, you wouldn't use it, but it works quite well if you want to enjoy your driving. Then we come down to more leather harness. This is again quite modern, but it does do the job, but it wouldn't be for showing or attelage, but okay for everyday work. And then we have more of the man-made types of biothane harness for everyday exercise. And then we come into the brighter, sharper looking harness. Again, this is leather. It's not English made. It works quite well for some people. It's got plenty of bling on it. And for some people with their turnouts, that's what they like. They like the bling. It's much more, again, trade orientated because it's got the kidney beaters on it. And collar with the tugs on with these swag loops. Again, it's a showing of wealth. This is a modern copy set of harness. If you can find a really good old-fashioned original set, you are talking big money. It's currency. Right, so Russell, you are one of the real enthusiasts that's come into carriage driving. What's your story?
The story?
How did you get started?
Well, I went to groom for somebody. I got a friend who'd got a broken leg, wasn't able to get on and off the carriage very quickly, so I went to groom for him, and we were doing Frisians then. And then I thought, this seems better than riding, so away we went. We bought a drive-in Frisian, and then put my Frisian with his, and we got a pair, and then it just carried on from there.
You got bitten by the bug, didn't you?
Bitten by the bug, and then bitten by the horse traders. So everything that we were buying was somebody else's rubbish. So then we decided in the end just to buy foals, and we bought foals from Holland, and then they've grown up with us over the last 8 years. And so we're putting together now, slowly putting together some teams of Dutch warm bloods.
But you've also got a lovely collection. I've watched you buying over the years. You've got some beautiful carriages, some fabulous harness, and you bring them out and you drive them and enjoy them, don't you?
Yeah, I do enjoy getting all the carriages out. It's a difficult one if you buy a carriage that's very original but not capable of being driven. So in that case we'll do as sympathetic conservation as we can. But I mean, at the last sale we bought this Thomas Tilling carriage, and the hood's as rotten as a pear. So I'm never going to be able to use it. So rather recklessly, we're having a new hood on it. But that carriage had been in the Science Museum since 1938, and nobody else had seen it. So what's the point in putting stuff away like that? And I think carriages are dropping out of favour really as well with a lot of the general public. So it's important to get them all out and about and let people see them and feel them and touch them.
But it's also the social history. It's a live museum, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
We were talking earlier about the story that each carriage can bring to the table and how you can enhance that story by using it, showing it, putting all the right harness, horses and everything together, and enjoy that whole picture and that whole story.
Yeah. So again, we'll walk through the carriage house and decide what carriages we're going to use for what. Normally we'll go to an attelage or a BDS drive or something like that. So decide what we're going to use with which carriage, which horse, all the harness to go together. Try and plan the year out before we start the year, really.
And it's a great social thing as well, because you need lots of help.
Yeah.
You can use it both for business but also for social occasions.
And if you look at the attelage worlds that we go into, people talk about happy families. I don't know so much about all happy families, but there is a lot of help. There's a lot of help and little tidbits that people will say to you that you either didn't think about, you didn't know about, and just helps you a little bit further on your journey.
I've always said it's a working museum the whole time.
Yeah. And you're either in it to win it, or you're in it to have fun and take part, and we're in it to have fun and take part.
And you certainly do, because you support all disciplines of driving, which is lovely. And it's lovely also to see some of your social media stuff, to your breeding programme, the latest thing you bought.
Yep. So not every day's a lucky day. You know, we lost a foal to a maiden mare the other day. But you know, that's one of them things, isn't it? So it makes you appreciate all the little good things.
And were you a horseman from a young age?
No. We've only been horsing since 2010.
There you are. You see, it shows everything.
So in the last 15 years, yeah. And we've got a decent collection.
You've got a very nice collection, and it's lovely because you use it as well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
So this is what we would call a Victoria, and there's lots of interesting features about a Victoria, but it was named after Queen Victoria, and one of the reasons was because of this low entry point. So in your dotage, it's quite easy to get in because it's not a very big step. You've got a wide footwell here and sit down on these seats. So generally it's for two people, but you have an additional seat here which folds out, and this is called an occasional seat because it's used occasionally, but it's lovely and neat. We've got some in the brome as well, and then it folds up. So you can have two little people there, perhaps some children sitting there. So this is, although it's in pretty dilapidated condition, it's an absolutely beautiful vehicle. You can see the quality all over it, including the original horsehair stuffing in these cushions and the lovely old leather. So you can just see the horsehair, and actually it survives very well through time. These trim bits, this is called the apron that comes down here, which is just a flap, and that's the carriage lace. And this folding back hood, so it's sort of a 3/4 enclosed carriage, so in inclement weather you can have that all the way forward, and then it folds back and it would fold right down to give you a fully open carriage. But just the lines throughout this, it's an incredibly elegant carriage. It would always be coachman driven. So you would have your coachman, not woman necessarily, up there, and then you would have your liveried groom here. You've got the steps, they'd come up from the hubcap to the additional step and sit up there, and the coachman would be sitting on that far side and would be operating the handbrake as well. Starting from the front, this is quite interesting because a Victoria by and large would be driven with either a single or a pair of horses, and you can see here where the ends of the shafts attach. And one of the first things you look at is to see if there's a fitting for a splinter bar as well. And that's where you've got the bar that comes across the front. We'll show that on some of the other carriages. But you also have the hook underneath that would hold the pole end. And you don't have that on this carriage. So this vehicle was only ever going to be driven with a single horse. And you've got the shafts there. But one of the first things you would look at would be to see if it could be driven with a pair as well. So there's a lot of craftsmanship has gone into this vehicle. You've just got the lovely bend on the turntable, or the fifth wheel as it's sometimes called, and just look at the steam bent of some of the wooden bits as well, and these are called the dub ends, and they've been beautifully carved and finished. And one of the signs of quality in a vehicle like this is when you look at it and you think about all the little extras that aren't essential for its structural stability. So to have these little sort of oval-shaped carvings on the end there, that's just a bit of extra quality, and also this fluting into the wood, the way the futchels have been finished as well. And another telltale is if the spring leaves, so these are what we call the elliptic springs in carriage terms, if they've been tapered off as well. The wheels are what we'd call English pattern, where you've got this slightly staggered shape going into the hubs, and that gives you quite a lot of stability. On a more formal carriage like this, which will carry more people, you've got a fairly big hub, and 3 different woods traditionally went into making a wheel. The spokes were made of oak because it's a long and strong grain, so you had that length with a very strong wood in the oak. The fellies, as they would be called, and again another sign of quality on here, is just how they've been chamfered off there. So you can just see this sort of lip here where it comes down to hold the spokes in place. And these are actually in sections. Once you rub the wheel down, you'll be able to see how many sections they're made into. And this used to be made out of ash because it was quite elastic. The hub was generally made out of elm, again, a wood that has quite a strong grain. You want the hub to hold everything in place. So the different properties of the different woods would be used on the carriage. The body might well be made out of mahogany, again, another wood that would hold its shape over a long time. But until you absolutely rub it down and do some carbon testing, it's a bit difficult to tell. And then you've got these sweeping leather splashboards, and a bit like the dashboard in front, these would have been in a patent leather, which is a form of japanned leather. They had this treatment put on the top to make this real sort of shiny finish, and over time it dries and crackles. So a little bit similar to japanning in furniture making. A lot of the same skills used in building carriages, with all the different components that you'd find in certainly the furniture building. And again, you've got this lovely sweep and just a little gesture there, another carving which matches the dub ends. The step is integrated into the front and the back splash boards or mud guards, and then you've got this stirrup shaped, quite generous holder onto the step here. Coming behind, you can see just the brake pads, so they're operated by the handbrake that the coachman would have. And you can see quite an interesting, there's obviously been a bit of wear and tear over the years, just that tells a tale where the end of the bolt and the nut have just probably rubbed a little bit into this. This is probably what we call a panel boot Victoria, because you've got this deep panelling at the back. Similar comments for the wheels. They're a little bit bigger behind. On a vehicle like this, you would have smaller wheels in front so that they can tuck in under. You've got a good turning circle, whereas these bigger wheels at the back, they're for covering the ground. Matching springs. You didn't always have the same shape of springs front and back. And then at the back here, what we would call the pump handles, so that's part of the metal struts that are holding the body in place. And again, another sign of quality, just this little bit of finish here. On some of the carriages, and if you look across to the town or the sheriff's coach over there, you'll see there's a footman's platform, and you'll also see the spiky bar at the back. That's called an urchin's bar, and that used to stop some of the street kids jumping on the back of the carriage, which they would do, and they'd hold on to anything to get a free ride. So the urchin bar at the back actually served a purpose to stop them going on. Sometimes you would have a little window in the back here, but it doesn't look like there was ever the capacity to have a groom's platform here. And although it does need a huge amount of renovation if you were going to bring it back to its original condition, just as a work of art and demonstrating all sorts of different trades and crafts, from the leather work to the shaping of the metal. A lot of this will be done under heat, to the wheelwrights. It's just an absolutely beautiful vehicle, and it's been a real treat to have it here at the sale. So this is another four-wheel carriage which will be driven by your coachman, and it's fully enclosed, as you can see. It's called a Brougham, B-R-O-U-G-H-A-M, and the original designer of this carriage was a Lord Brougham. So there's all sorts of different ways of naming the vehicles. It could be the designer, it could be the builder, it could be the town or village or city it originated from. We've got Liverpool gigs and Norfolk carts and all sorts of things. So this is a Brougham, and they were used as early taxis. They were actually designed to be used commercially. Anyway, quite quickly they were superseded by the hansom cabs, but they remained a really popular carriage, fully enclosed. If you imagine going out and about in a city in your smart outfits to go to the theatre or something, this is exactly what you'd have. Now, this is an interesting vehicle because this again will take a single, so you've got where the shafts would click on here, and you can see the shafts, but you can also have this splinter bar in front, and you can see this square loop here, and there is the indicator that this would have had a pole in there as well. So the end of the pole is put in. It would slide under the cross member here and held in place, and then you would have your two horses. You wouldn't drive a team of four, you would only ever have two horses, so a single or a pair. So as we always say, you get two for the price of one. Quite a neat little dashboard here, the handle there to help the groom get up and down, and again the handbrake on the side for the coachman. Interesting feature here, these long hubcaps. I'm not entirely convinced that the body and the wheels and the axles and everything started life together. Although this is pretty nice, I'm not sure that the quality of that build I'm not convinced that the quality of this, it's okay, but it doesn't match the quality of this part of the vehicle. Again, you've got some nice lines coming down here. This is a fairly standard little sweep on the Brougham, but what really sets this one apart, is this beautiful shaped glass. So that's where you get the bow fronted. And again, to shape glass, those of you that know about these things know that it's quite an operation. Another nice feature, again, quality feature, is where you get these covered step treads. So that means if you get in with your silk slippers on, you're not going to have any mud splashed up on there. So that's, they didn't have to do that. That's just the manufacturers adding in a little bit of an extra touch. What really sets this vehicle apart, again, it's one that does need a bit of restoration, you wouldn't necessarily put your horses to and go off, is this beautiful interior, and you can really see how much quality there was there. There's carriage lace, like a border round the door, and the windows drop down, and quite often you would have an additional board in there called the night board. You get them on coaches as well, and you drop down your window, and then at night you would have the night board. Pretty dark in there the handles, and you can see on there the maker's name, Ridges and Son of Wolverhampton, and that's actually really special because we tend to look at the hubcaps when we're trying to work out first time round who built a vehicle. If you don't have the hubcaps, you can then take the wheels off and see if there's a maker's name or a manufacturer's stamp on the axles on the part that goes into the hubs. But here you can see on these either bone or ivory bits where that is, so that's a lovely feature. But those windows would drop down and they would have, you can see the slots here in the handles that if you wanted it partially open or fully open, depending on the weather. Sometimes they had handles, yeah, you can see that. So that would have had a little bit on top of there, and that's for you to open it from the inside. Again, we've got the folding up seat here, which is an occasional seat, not terribly deep, but just remember people were smaller back in the day when this vehicle was built, probably about 150 years ago. Lovely features of the carriage lace. This would have a horsehair stuffing as well. You can feel that through this what we call Bedford cord. And what really sets this apart is just all these buttons, the upholstery in this leather pad on the doors. Just a lot of extra detail on there. They could have had 4 buttons or no buttons, but they've decided to put all that in. And the silk blinds which come down, and they're in fantastic condition with these little acorn-like ends, and they come up and down. I'm not going to pull them because they're quite delicate. And then there's the 2 little windows at the back that have got a covering there. Sometimes on the Bromes and these enclosed vehicles, you would have a cord. It was called the coachman's cord, and it would come out through the back and it would attach. It would go through the top of the vehicle and it would attach to a button or a lapel or something on the coachman's coat. And if the passengers wanted to communicate, they'd give it a little tug, and then the coachman would know to turn round, because obviously they wouldn't necessarily be in direct communication. Quite often these windows would slide round and open, and I think these might have opened once upon a time, but they certainly haven't for a very long time, but just the tasseled ends there. But lovely to have those original satiny silk blinds in place. Really interesting vehicle. And again, a feature of many Bromes is you've got your mudguard on the side of the body there, not over the wheel as you'd see on a lot of other four-wheeled vehicles, but that serves just as good a purpose. But it also indicates that it wasn't necessarily being driven on particularly muddy roads. They were used in towns and cities a bit more, not necessarily for covering longer distances. This is a member of the Phaeton family, and it's a type that you don't find terribly often, and they're very sought after. It's called a semi or a demi-male Phaeton. And they're more formal carriages, but it's male as in M-A-I-L. A full male Phaeton has the undercarriage, which is a bit like a coach with what we call the perch underneath, which is where you have the bar that goes between the 2 axles. And you don't necessarily have such a big turning circle. Here you can see with this cut-in arch in the body that you've got a good turning circle, and if you had the bar underneath there, this perch as we call it, you couldn't have that, you'd have a stopping point. So what sets this vehicle apart? This would be an owner-driven vehicle. You wouldn't necessarily have your coachman or staff driving it, but the staff would sit on the seat behind. So this is a vehicle you would take out with a very smart pair of horses. You'd want to be them tall and good-looking and very well matched. Again, you can have this with a single or a pair, and the giveaway here is you've got, this is what we call the splinter bar with these roller bolt ends, and that's what the traces hook over. So these are roller bolt ends, and on the outside of the splinter bar, they've gone into step treads. So you get up by putting your first foot on the hubcap, next foot on here, and then across here to quite a wide plate. And actually, a good way of seeing if a carriage has had a lot of use over the years is just run your hands over these sorts of plates, and if they're very worn, you can imagine they've been trodden on lots of times, but if they're like a cheese grater, then you'll know that they haven't been used quite so much. You've got quite a wide dash here, the integral handles to help you get up on either side, and the wide dash is partly to protect the people inside, the driver and their companion, more likely to be a smart gentleman and his hopefully wife or lady companion, and that's to protect them a little bit from mud and weather, but also to shield them from what inevitably happens at the rear end of a horse. On full elliptic springs front and back, so you've got these sort of squash circles again that we've pointed out a lot, these extra carvings on here, what we call the dub ends, and just these chamfered bits as part of the turntable. Lovely quality vehicle that comes with its shafts and poles. Interestingly, where we've got handbrakes on other vehicles, this one has a foot brake, but it's actually set quite high, and that goes back to the brake pads on the back wheels. What we call iron shod wheels. Until the invention of India rubber, we had all our vehicles on these sorts of wheels. You can see they are screwed in tight onto this outside rim of the wheel, which is called the fellies, and you can just see where there's been slight cracking. That'll be the length of the felly will be there to there, so that'll be one bit of continuous wood, and all these elements will be put together under using hot water, heat and water and steam and all this sort of thing. Lovely, elegant shape to the back of the seat here. Now sometimes this would be real wicker. This is really well varnished over, but sometimes it would be painted to look like wicker, or it is real wicker, but you've got a little bit of texture there, and the lovely big leather hood. This is a bit faded, it's been exposed to the elements, which is rather sad, but that would have been a Melton, navy Melton, and again buttoned pads or squabs on the seats. The slight wedge shape for the driver means you've got more stability up through your feet, so whether you're pleasure and leisure driving like this or doing competitive driving, to have that angle from your feet there, so the driver should never sit on a flat seat, a bit more of an angle, and sometimes the bigger the horses and the coaches and all that sort of thing, you'll have more of an angle. If you think about a brewery dray, the driver's pretty much standing up, and on coaches. And again, another lovely quality touch is to have that additional backrest there. Now, on these male and demi-male phaetons, you get these big hoods, and again, this is to protect everybody on this end from the weather, but no such luxury is afforded to the grooms behind. Now, they have to get up through here. They've just got these little knobbly bits on the end here, and that is where they would secure their knee rugs, if indeed they are given them. But they get up on these steps here, and if the turnout is already in motion, they have to be pretty skilled at getting up and not getting their feet and legs caught in the wheels whilst they're moving, because that's definitely broken leg territory. And actually there's not a huge amount of room for them. When that hood is folded back, it comes to about here, and they have to sit bolt upright. They probably have two grooms on here. But again, just lovely lines to this vehicle. It's pretty simple in its design, but it's very elegant. There was some talk about this belonged to the Lord Lonsdale. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I sold this originally some years ago for about £13,000. Obviously the market has changed a little bit, and it's just been sold for £6,000, but it's not in such good condition as when I sold it 20-something years ago. But a very sought-after type that is used nowadays either in the show ring or for attelage de tradition, which is a fairly recent movement over here in the UK. It's been going in Europe for 25 years or so, and that encourages people to bring out these antique traditional vehicles to a three-phase competition, and that's certainly getting a lot of popularity and a big following here. So this is what we'd call a semi or a demi male phaeton.